We are live. I think we're live. Yes, we are. Smash the like button. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and let us know if you can hear us. We're live once again. We've got a range of topics to talk about, not least the King in Congress, which has produced some extraordinary memes, extraordinary clips, and it's actually produced some stuff that I don't think we've seen actually in this Trump term, possibly since the first Trump term, which is is legislators in the US looking for recognizing leadership and being supportive of it across the aisle. So we're going to get into that. I think it's really kind of interesting. Then we have Eldridge Colby, my old friend. Actually, he is maybe the worst of the worst. He has just pulled mandated funding that was already approved by Congress, and that has been pulled and won't go to Ukraine. We're going to dig into that. And David, introduce yourself, and I think you've got a couple of topics you want to spring on the audience as well.
Hello. Yes, David D'Abato here, co-host, co-creator, and partner in crime with my friend Jonathan with the Dictators. And as I often tell you, I have my own channel, which is the No Delusion Zone. No delusions are allowed. If you come with a delusion, you will be blocked. I'd like to talk to you for about 5 seconds, and then you'll be blocked. So please do go there, become a subscriber. Also, my Substack, which is protectingtherepublic.com. We need a lot of folks to protect our republic in America right now. It's fast vanishing under MAGA. So that's what's going on there. And as Jonathan said, please hit the subscribe button here on his channel, of course, and as I said, on mine as well. Jonathan, kick off the topics you have. I joined late here with you, and I'm going to try to round up some clips, if I could, on the topics I was talking about. So it's all yours.
It's interesting. I mean, the King's visit is nonpartisan. I think that kind of shines through. Apart from J.D. Vance demonstrably sitting during some of it and demonstrably not applauding when the King mentioned Ukraine, it seemed that everybody else found a kind of something to agree on, something to celebrate, which I haven't seen in American politics, well, as I say, since the Trump first term.
I agree. Did you actually get a chance to hear any of the King's speech or watch the clips?
And it was incredibly pointed as well. I mean, it was, he wasn't coming in admonishing, like an adult scolding a child, but there was an element here. There was a gentle kind of, gentle nudge in the ribs, which is, this is what you guys always stood for. This was the core of the dream and why you broke away. And I think he said, or implied, rightly broke away from British control. And I think he's gently reminding that these values are under a high degree of duress, and they are not subscribed to by everybody in that hall, in that legislative building. So it was an extraordinarily subtle but quite political speech. Now, what did you make of it?
Well, I mean, I was impressed, actually, not by the subtlety and how he actually got his point across, as you understated Brits often do. He's really good at that. But I was more impressed by the relatively bipartisan reaction that he got. I didn't watch all of it. I watched several excerpts and clips, but there was a lot of applause. There was a lot of positive feedback. I didn't hear any boos, which is really common when you have somebody that is obviously criticizing Trump or the Republican administration. You hear a lot of boos, jeers, just really rude comments. I didn't hear any of that. They were very, I think, to be honest with you, Jonathan, I think they're awed by the King. I really do. I mean, I don't think he actually serves the same purpose in England as he does
more so than we are probably awed by him. Yes.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, we are more awed by the royal family. Actually, the whole idea of royalty in America, because we don't have it, obviously. In fact, what do I remember? Way back when I was a kid, my grandmother used to say that John F. President Kennedy. We have to, you should love him. We, as Americans, we need to love him because he's the closest thing we have to a king, to royalty. And in fact, what do they call his administration? Camelot. We always make that analogy to the British royal family. So anyway, I think there was a lot of that playing into it, that there's just a lot of awe and respect on both sides of the political aisle towards Great Britain, to be honest with you, but towards the king and royalty there. He's a very smart man. He's a good speaker. He doesn't fall all over himself. And I think it would have been really hard for Trump or any of MAGA, Melania rather, or Marco Rubio, any of those idiots, to actually come out and criticize him or to be rude as they do with Democrats. So I was impressed at the bipartisan reception that he got.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, obviously, if this had happened a year ago, maybe it would have been different. There would have been certain figures who, at Trump's beck and call, would have behaved in a boorish fashion. Marjorie Taylor Greene comes to mind. Lauren Boebert did record a particularly sort of toxic set of statements, but declared that she wouldn't be in the hall. So she absented herself. So it seems that those who would have caused some kind of fracas decided to stay away, which is good. But those that remain, some of them are probably peeling away, or the veneer of Trump is tarnished for them, so they're less likely to perhaps follow his lead. But that is to assume that Trump would have wanted any rudeness there. I don't think he would have. I think the king, because Trump is, as we know, an extremely small-minded person. He is quite hierarchical. He'll look on everyone in his inferiors in the typical fashion of his personage, which is monetary. Anyone who has less money than him is probably seen as less than human. And anyone who has piles of money, he flips into some kind of fairly grotesque obsequiousness. Although the Musk-Trump relation dynamic was quite an interesting one. But this is the difference here. I think because our hierarchy is not necessarily based on that kind of same material standard. It's based on other things, birth and class and other things. And of course, you can level all sorts of criticism at that way of organizing your hierarchy. But I think when it comes to American Trump, he actually would have wanted to bask in the glow of that. And he does not think of the king as subhuman. He thinks of that as actually, he aspires to be like Vladimir Putin. He also aspires to be regal in some ways, not perhaps realizing that he doesn't quite have the doesn't have the birth for it. He doesn't have the class and the tone or sophistication or any of that stuff.
Well, I think you made a good point there. He aspires to be the king. We've had, as you know, several No Kings rallies here in the United States because Donald Trump does see himself as a king. So he definitely, it's not covert, it's pretty blatant that he admires the king because he's the king. I don't think he likes what he says. But then again,
I don't think he understands what he says.
No, I was just going to say he doesn't get it. The king was blatantly criticizing him to his face. But since he didn't say
that, none of that,
well, he didn't hear that. No, because he didn't say, Donald, you're a complete asshole. He said it in other ways, and Donald was smiling and saying, yeah. But he knows he's the king. That he knows, and so he's not going to criticize him. He's going to fawn all over him, and so I didn't expect Trump to pull a Zelensky on him, for example.
No, it's a very different scenario there.
But do you know that they didn't allow photographers or videos in the meeting, the one-to-one with Trump, because they didn't want a Zelensky type of a situation. They waited until, the king made his statements later.
Yeah, very sensible. It was managed. This is one of the criticisms that is leveled at Zelensky, that he actually walked into the Oval Office debacle having been warned that was very likely, and apparently not really preparing in the way, if you can ever prepare for that scenario, but not necessarily preparing the response. Unless, of course, history will show maybe the White House debacle there was something that Zelensky wanted or needed. And indeed, I think it generally went in his favor. It's certainly very memorable for those who have any, dare I say it, sort of class or strategic thinking. They tend to think that Ukraine gained more from that actually in the long run than it lost. But no, I think the diplomatic staff, as has been pointed out, you wouldn't necessarily get on with all of his views, but I think my friend Joseph Leslie has some really good points to make out here, which is that the diplomatic team in the British embassy, they would have wargamed this to an extraordinary degree, and they would have engineered it so that there aren't these moments of embarrassment, tension, and so on. So that's yeah, it was very well handled, and I think they must be pleased with the result.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is just a side note to this. I don't want to stay on this topic that long, but I do want to ask you, since I believe, as I said, the king handled it very well, and I was very happy with the reception. Do you think, and we're talking about how Zelensky learned from his past experiences, the king didn't even allow himself to get in that position. Do you think that, old Starmer there has learned his lesson in terms of Trump? I've read all kinds of stories recently about him that he's learned, he hasn't learned. Where is he at in his relationship with Donald Trump?
I think, partly the lesson's been learned because he sent the king, didn't go himself. So that in itself is a lesson from this. The thing is, to answer that question and say he's learnt the lesson would be to suggest that somehow appeasing the great man baby is the be all and end all of international politics. It's kind of not, as we know. So when it comes to Starmer failing, I don't think that's even the most important thing. Whether he sticks two fingers up at Trump or appeases him or whatever, that's just an approach. That's a superficial tone. Will anything change? Will anything be impacted by that behavior one way or another? I expect not, actually, because Trump's going to do what Trump's going to do. Eldridge Colby, when it come to a minute, it was going to cancel that aid, come what may, no matter what Starmer said, no matter what propitiations or begging was made or appeasement or insults, that was going to happen anyway. Sanctions were going to get lifted on Russia anyway. So the more important thing is, what is Starmer failing at? Well, he's failing to bring the country around. He's failing to demonstrate leadership, to grow the economy. He is unfortunately failing on defense. We had a strategic defense review, which has got some good stuff in it. It's a very thorough piece of work. Lord Robertson, former head of NATO, and you've got Fiona Hill and others working on it who really kind of know their stuff. It's a great piece of work. It learns some of the lessons of Ukraine. The Starmer government accepted it, 100% of it. They didn't query any of the recommendations. They agreed to implement it, and yet they have not. And they have not made the effort to find the money, ring fence the money, generate the funds somehow to make it happen. So that, to me, is a far more important failure of leadership rather than what sort of tone to adopt with the great orange man baby.
Well, Germany and France, whether people agree with their leadership or not, are running away with the new leadership of Europe. Whether you like Merz or Macron, agree with them, whatever. I feel, at least, that they are finally getting it. Fast enough? No, absolutely not. Are they doing enough right now? Absolutely not. But Germany, their budget is increasing a lot. I actually said this yesterday, I think, on when we were speaking. Even though they're increasing their budget to over almost $250 million, they're not going to increase the budget or the Bundeswehr to the projected levels that they want until 2035. That's insane. Yeah. That's insane.
Game over, right?
It's stupid. Game over. They'll be speaking Ruski by this time. And France, again, I think Macron talks a good game, but between the two of them, they were at least trying to do something. They're trying to pull the rest of Europe, at least the willing, along, kicking and screaming. My question to you is the UK, under Starmer or whoever takes his place next, going to be left out of the mix? Are they going to be, part of a strong military Europe again? Whether or not they rejoin the EU, or are they going to be kind of, have-nots and leftovers?
Yeah. Well, rejoining the EU is central to answering that, of course, because if we don't align more closely with Europe, we will almost by default be left out. Starmer has been actually making some movements in that direction. We've been getting a lot closer to Europe, but there's a general lack of leadership. It's now agreed, and the data tends to show the majority of people even amongst those who voted for Brexit, think it was a mistake and it's caused considerable damage. The leadership, the position of a leader would be, right, this is going to upset some people. We're going to rerun the referendum, and we are going to really make the case of what an absolute disaster this has been. It does two things. It gets the issue out. It gets the dirty laundry. It picks open the scabs, fine, but it allows us to acknowledge that terrible decisions and mistakes were made and that the wrong information was given and actually inaccurate, manipulated information was given. It also tackles the other problem we've got, which is our own little mini Orban, which is Nigel Farage, who is stoked up on what is alleged to be crypto cash. One wonders where that's come from, and has been parroting Kremlin narratives for decades. This person, his grift, his incipient fascism, his grotesque populism, and the fact that he's going to be such a destructive personage if he ever gets near power, this needs to be addressed head on rather than just pretending it's not happening. This is the other failure of Starmer. You know, he could, I think, tackle the three big issues all at the same time, and they all come back to the same thing. We need to get close to Europe. We need to revoke this disaster. We need to be far more open about how Russia influenced Brexit. And they did, with huge injections of cash during the vote, just prior to the vote, and in the years before it by supporting characters like Farage, etc. They need to tackle that. They need to tackle the rearmament, reversal of Brexit, getting close to Europe. The economy will not be fixed. Therefore, we will not have the money to build out our defenses unless the nettle is grasped on these other points. All of them require extraordinary risk and leadership, and someone who's a great communicator. Alas, Starmer is not it. He does seem to be able to be quite an effective manager of his party in quashing dissent and doing that sort of backroom politics, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the front room stuff and the real leadership decisions, he's just flaky.
You're right. I mean, we've both said this for years. It all comes down to leadership. It's not just a matter of resources. Those are important, of course. It doesn't even come down to a matter of policy. It comes down to leadership, a strong leader with a good agenda, but a strong leader that can speak and lead his people, can do almost anything. Unfortunately, you guys are stuck with a weak leader who, as you said, probably makes some good, backdoor deals, or at least he can talk to the people behind closed doors. But when it comes to leading the people, when it comes time to putting on a public face, he comes across as weak. We unfortunately have the opposite. We've got a guy who loves to talk to the camera, who is a strong leader, but for the wrong reasons. But that's why I talked about Merz and Macron, because they are strong leaders. They haven't done enough, but they finally, in my opinion, are coming out of the shadows and trying to pull, the ones that are less strong, that are still cowards, which is the majority of, unfortunately, Western Europe. They're trying to pull them along, kicking and screaming. Whether that will be fast enough, I don't know, because, as you know, the Russian threat, if anything, and we could talk about the demise of the Kremlin or Putin, but the Russian threat is not going away anytime soon. They need to get their act together. I'm talking about Western Europe, and most probably led by Ukraine, actually,
yes.
who is the torchbearer for Western democracy and who is actually outsourcing their defense expertise, not only to Europe, but to the Middle East. So I think they should be looking south to Ukraine for leadership, and some of them are actually starting to do that.
I think that's incredibly important. I mean, I'm going to do some episodes on this, what Putin does next. But here's a scenario for people, which they'll also see on the channel in various news episodes I'm going to do. What's Putin going to do? I mean, his dictatorship has been relatively economical with terror and fear. People are going to find that a bit odd, especially when they hear Russians going like, "Oh, we live in such a terrible dictatorship, we can't do anything about it," and blah 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 blah, and all the rest. But actually, Putin's regime has been relatively surgical with terror. There is still a relatively small population that is incarcerated, political prisoners. The handful that there are, do get a little bit of press. outweigh actually more attention than say, brave Ukrainians who are in captivity, unfortunately. But it's relatively economical. It started out as what was termed spin dictatorship, hybrid dictatorship. Is it or isn't it? And allowing a certain plurality to exist, while really you control all the levers behind the scenes and you control all the opposition as well as the official government parties. So it's a sort of extraordinarily clever and rather efficient dictatorship. And until 2012, it also kind of left the economy to be handled by what are called liberal economists, not liberal in terms of their political views, but liberal in terms of their economic competence, and many of them were extremely competent. Elvira Nabiolina, despite being an evil little bureaucrat, is not incompetent within the parameters set for her. But Putin has had to become more brutal. I used this phrase with Ponomarov when he was on our channel. I said that the Donbass is an outsourced gulag. The fact that we don't see it as a giant prison camp doesn't mean that he hasn't, recreated this extraordinary Soviet slaughterhouse and territory of terror. It's there, and it's comparable. Maybe not in scale, but it's comparable to the evils of the gulag. But again, he's done it in such a way that it has a degree of, it's hiding in plain sight. And he's been able to maintain this dictatorship through the hint and the suggestion of fear, by also saying to people, look, if you don't play ball, we have this outsourced gulag, we have this meat grinder, happy to send you there, always needs more bodies. So just the implication of these things has worked very well. The implications of his Chechen guards and thugs and terrorists and killers has worked very well. But people are now starting to, not in a coordinated political fashion, they're starting to say, this guy Putin doesn't seem to be any good. He doesn't seem to know what he's doing. He's losing his powers. He's weak, etc. Well, the only way, if you can't use economic terror, you have to go to the next level if you want to survive. So my prediction is three things. Putin is, in this year, he's going to reach for mass mobilization, which is already happening, a sort of hidden mass mobilization. He's going to go for mass terror and repression. In response to the voices that are now raised against him. He doesn't understand that switching off the internet is like switching off the life support of the modern economy. He doesn't know how that stuff works, and is being advised by a bunch of KGB goons who couldn't care less. And the third one, what do you do if you're Putin and you can't beat Ukraine and your regime is imploding or support for it is collapsing, and you see Europe resurgent, partly, and supplying Ukraine with what it needs? Well, you're going to have to build an external enemy, and you're going to have to lash out and try to deter Europe from its ongoing support for Ukraine. So I predict three things: mass mobilization, mass repression, and at scale, possibly hybrid attacks on Europe. All this year, all happening soon, because this is the only way Putin can go if he wants to survive.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And as far as the hybrid war, that's, as you know, been going on for a while. But he, as you said, is going to increase that. Look, I know it's a little disgusting, but to further what you're talking about in terms of the Donbass and the situation or the problems within the Russian military, and I'm not making this up or quoting some tabloid. The Mirror, for example. No, this is coming from the Kyiv Press, which is pretty respectable English language newspaper out of Kyiv. They're claiming that in several units in Ukraine, Russian units fighting in Ukraine, that the level of rations, food rations, is so low.
Don't use the C word, by the way.
multiple sources, they're resorting to the C word.
Yeah. So we can't say the C word because
no, you can't say it, so I won't. But what do you think this is accurate or what? Like I said, the Kyiv Post is pretty legitimate.
It is. I did an episode on the channel a year and a half ago, which was like, I think it was something like Dima ate Vova. I put a kind of humorous spin on it, but it's not the first. It's not first report.
It's not the first report, but apparently it's getting much worse because the Ukraine is hammering the supply and logistics centers, that bring supplies into eastern Ukraine, and so they're getting even less. To follow up your other point, though, the Putin regime, the Kremlin, is only as strong as it is until it isn't anymore. It's strong today, and then it could be gone tomorrow. However, I will have to say, based on what you just said and the repressive measures that I believe he is going to take this year and beyond, I don't see the Putin regime collapsing anytime soon. Of course it will. I just don't see it happening as fast as we would like.
No.
But I just don't see it happening because he does still have a lot of power over everything, not just the oligarchs, everything. And yes. I think he'll resort to whatever he has to do in order to stay in power. And that's quite a lot that he can do to stay in power. And I think that's going to be for a while.
I think this is it. This is what we've really failed to understand in Europe and the West, is what Putin is prepared to do and what tools does he have at his disposal in order to retain power. And this isn't some sort of tin pot South American dictatorship. This isn't Chavez. This is someone who came from the organization that organized Stalin's terror. This is someone who understands how to wield extreme power, extreme coercion, torture, murder on an extraordinary scale, and to be vindictive in a way that we cannot even imagine. Take the story of how Navalny died. You heard, the story that he had some kind of rare frog toxin in his body. Did you hear the theory of why? Because it's pretty weird. Apart from the we can, so we will, and we'll use an exotic poison so everyone knows it's not an accident and we did it. That was my first interpretation. But no, apparently at some point early in his rebellion, as it were, against Putin, Navalny referred to Putin as a żaba, or a toad, as in, a sort of greasy, sort of parasitical kind of entity. And that may be stuck. That may be stuck for 15 years. Okay, you call me a toad. Well, we'll get the last laugh here. Mm-hmm. They poisoned him with a rare frog poison.
And that speaks volumes. And you're absolutely right. He is a vengeful ex-KGB officer. He's not
thief
going
and a
to
killer.
wait.
He's a thief and a killer.
Absolutely. I mean, he's Trump with a brain. He really is. As evil as Trump is, and he's pretty evil, he doesn't have the wherewithal. He doesn't have the brain power or the experience or the training to do what Putin can do. And he controls every leverage of power there is. Not just power, but everything, every facet of Russian life. He controls it. Everybody's beholden to him. I laughed today, just quickly. The mayor of Tula, I believe, was arrested on bribery. Really? Bribery in Russia? Oh, my God.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, really.
Yeah, and it was only for something minuscule. I mean, in my opinion, it was something like, I don't know, $1 million or a few $1 million, which in Russia is, chump change for bribery and all of that. So I don't know. He's not going anywhere. I guess my point is we're going to be with Putin for a while. He is going to make a move on Eastern Europe, eastern flank of NATO, whether it's initially through hybrid warfare, which he's already done.
Yeah, and again, if it's hybrid, it doesn't really have to be Eastern Europe. In fact, it may work better by targeting Central and Western Europe.
Well, he has Germany and several other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Denmark, he's hit the airports. He's blown up. Was it Rheinmetall? He's threatened their CEO. He's hit several factories. And so forth.
A warehouse caught fire. Absolutely. Huge warehouse fire in Britain just this week.
Well,
nothing to do with Russia, of course. But at some point, we'll probably find out that it was storing aid for Ukraine or military supplies or goodness knows what. I mean, this is usually the pattern. Oh no, it's all a complete coincidence until you join the dots and you say, I just don't buy that. I just do not buy it.
Well, we're closing. The time is running against us here. I do want to talk about the only other story that I wanted to mention today in the few moments that we have left, and that's to talk about Putin's best forever friend or Trump's best forever friend, whatever, the lunatic on the other side of the pond here in the States. The continuing saga of President Trump being vengeful and targeting his political enemies. No matter how many years ago it was, no matter how trivial and ridiculous the trumped up, I hate to use the word, but trumped up fake charges are, he continues. The latest insanity is a new indictment, a second indictment against the former director of the FBI, James Comey. The first one failed because it was thrown out, believe it or not, by one of Trump's judges for being just totally fantastical. So not to, to fail or to stop there, he got his new Justice Department to indict Comey again. What for this time? Something very, very important, and I'm sure a matter of national security. He claims that James Comey, former director of the FBI, sent a veiled threat, and this is their words of the DOJ, Department of Justice, to assassinate President Ford by putting a code on a beach in Seychelles. Here's the code, 8647. 86 in slang in America means to do away with, or it's over. 86 it means to destroy it. 47, it's the president's number. He's the 47th American president. So this was written on a beach, I guess, a few weeks ago somewhere. Maybe, I think, Maryland, wherever he was vacationing, in Seychelles. And because of this, James Comey, former director of the FBI, has been indicted on an attempt to assassinate the president of the United States.
Did he do it, though? Did he actually lay out some seashells in that format?
Well, he's referred that to his attorney. So
okay.
whether or
and
not
does doing away imply, erasing, or could it just be, he needs to go politically?
It could be many of the vote for the Democrat, in the next election. It could mean anything. It's slang, number one. Number two, it's seashells, for God's sake. He's not
high caliber ammunition shells. Should have been a bit of more direct message.
A castaway on a tropical island, asking for help. This was on a Maryland beach somewhere, and he was just having fun with his family. God knows what it meant. But these are the lengths that Trump and MAGA is going to indict, to harass, to just destroy the lives of his political enemies, who go to any lengths whatsoever. So this is what we are continuing to deal with here. And there's some videos out there. I encourage folks to watch on YouTube or on social media about James Comey, who has been pretty good about this. He's got some brief videos where he's saying, he's not afraid. This is, of course, nonsense, and bring it on, because this is, of course, just lunacy. So we'll see what happens.
That's weird, isn't it? And the other one I wanted to cover was Eldridge Colby. It was a vile piece of scum. And he, like Vance, seems to be absolutely ideologically opposed, politically opposed in every way to support for Ukraine. The obvious conclusion to me is, that is directly working in the interests of Russia. But why are Vance and Colby so absolutely destructive and objectionable when it comes to Ukraine? Because when the king mentioned support for Ukraine, it got a thunderous reception in the hall yesterday, or from across the aisle. I didn't see, apart from Vance, anybody demonstrably not cheering that phrase.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to when Vance was in Germany last year at the Munich Security Conference, and he made a complete ass out of himself when he chastised Europe and promoted the Kremlin's agenda. Look, after all this time, and I hate to say it because I don't have any proof, Jonathan, but J.D. Vance and your other friend there at the Defense Department, I believe, are on the payroll of the Kremlin. They're getting funding. Yeah. They're getting assistance from the Kremlin. To me, this is obvious.
Or are they auditioning for funding? Because maybe Colby is getting, it could be, but Vance could be pathetic enough just to be auditioning. Look at me, I'll say and do whatever you want.
Yeah, I may be the next U.S. president, so you really have to get behind me. I'll say anything you want. I'll
it's rather
all of our allies.
Make me. It's not easy auditioning. It's make me the next U.S. president,
Yes. Yeah. Just like you did Trump. Look, whether or not they're currently receiving assistance, whether it's financial or otherwise, from the Kremlin, I think it's irrelevant at this point, just as I say about Trump, because they are pushing the Kremlin's agenda. So whether they're getting money, support politically or otherwise, it doesn't matter. They are traitors. They are supporting and advancing the Kremlin's agenda in the United States against Ukraine, but also against Americans. And that is disgraceful. These are people that need to be put on trial when the Democrats or some opposition party wins the election and the Republicans are out of power.
Before we jump off as well, they're also backing losers. This is the thing I can't, that's been clear to me is if you look at the pattern of his career, for want of a better word, Trump has backed more losers than winners. And he seems to be able to sniff out losers and embrace them as if they're winning opportunities. He's picked the wrong side here. He's picked Russia, which ultimately is going to crash and burn. It is burning, judging by Tuapse. He, in some ways, has unfailingly picked a loser here, and he is allergic to Ukraine, which is becoming the winner in this. A country that is not afraid of the idea of victory, that's not afraid of fighting for what you want, that's not afraid of heroism, morality, and values that they're fighting for. I can see why Trump is diametrically opposed to this, because none of these things describe him. But just the idea that he can just, ride a loser to the end is an extraordinary characteristic he seems
Jonathan,
to have.
Haven't you seen the clips of Trump saying that he prefers losers? He loves to be around losers. He says, I don't like to be around winners because they make me look bad.
So smart people, yeah.
Yeah, he does. He says, I love the uneducated people, and I love losers. I mean, and this is a man that was voted in as president by tens of millions of people. Look, he loves, look at his companies. How many times has he gone bankrupt? So he picks losers there too, 3 or 4 companies, and people, well, MAGA still portrays him as this successful businessman. He's a complete loser himself.
Yeah. So and without daddy's money would be absolutely nowhere. And now it's big daddy's money in the Kremlin.
Now it's our money, Americans' money, the treasury that he raided with Elon Musk and Doge.
Yes, exactly. And that needs to be held to account at some point as well.
Yes.
Well, that's it. So I think we're wrapping for today. Lots of stuff we covered here. Thank you everyone for the comments. I didn't get to the comments. Well, try and do that properly tomorrow. We might be starting a little earlier than advertised today.
Yeah, what do you think our schedule it is tomorrow, Jonathan? Just to let them know. What do you think? Start time. Do we know a start time yet?
No, we don't know what the start time is yet, but
okay.
12 UK might be if it's not too crazy early for you. But
okay,
well, we'll figure it out and we'll publish that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Yeah, we'll talk.
Thank you everyone for your comments and joining. Yeah.
Thank you.
More fun and games tomorrow.
Cheers.